Becoming an entrepreneur was not something that I had dreamed of, and it's not something that I desired. I always wanted to be someone's manager or a supervisor. And so that was just a role that I always strived to fill at every job that I found myself working. And it wasn't until about 2020 when the pandemic hit and everybody was, stuck inside their house and, no one really knew what was going to happen, that I really began to think about my career. I thought about how I felt like I was beating my head against the brick wall. I wasn't really accomplishing or achieving everything that I set out to do. And I was just tired, I was tired. And it took my daughter to have a very candid, frank conversation with me and say, Mom, you know what you're supposed to be doing. At the time I was teaching, I was trying to get my foot in the door as far as administration was concerned. I had gone back to school to get my master's degree in educational leadership. I graduated. My teaching certificate had been upgraded, and I just felt like I had been doing everything that I was supposed to do in order to move up, right? Yet and still I was falling short. And so my daughter was like, Mom, maybe it's a sign that that's just not what God wants you to do. At that time, I was still tutoring, and I'm going to get into my journey as far as how I started this company, KIP Tutoring Service LLC, in a minute. But let me finish this thought first. So at the time I was still tutoring, right? I was tutoring part-time on the side, and I really wasn't focused on it. You know what I mean? Yet and still I was getting all kinds of phone calls from old clients that I'd had from years before. I was getting referrals. I wasn't doing anything to try and grow this tutoring company at that time, because my focus again was trying to get into administration. And so she pointed that out. She was like, Mom, you're not even trying, and yet you're getting these phone calls. Maybe this is the Lord saying that you need to shift, right? It's not by accident that your bachelor's degree is in business and yet your master's degree is in education. Why not combine the two and just run your tutoring company? And she was right. She was right. But the reality was I was scared. That's just what it was. I was afraid. What if it didn't work? You know what I mean? What if, I lost everything? You know what I mean? Trying to build this company. What ifs? It was just a lot of what ifs. And so she told me a quote that she had seen somewhere on social media. And essentially it said, if your dreams don't scare you, then it's not a dream. And she was like, Mom, you're supposed to be scared. If you're not, then is it really a dream? Is it, really from God? And so I was like, you're right. You're right. I preach faith. I talk about faith. I teach faith at my church as a leader. But I'm not really applying it. I'm not really using it as it relates to this area of my life. And so it was at that moment that I decided, you know what, Lord, take the wheel for real, for real. I'm not going to take it back. I'm not going to snatch it back. For real, take the wheel, and wherever you lead me, I will follow. And so there started the relaunch of KIP Tutoring Service LLC. I say relaunch because I actually started this company in 2011, and I did pretty well with it. I started it at a time when I was unemployed. I did not renew my teaching contract at that time. For time's sake, basically, I was not finished with my teaching certification program within the time frame that they had given me to finish. And so because of that, they told me that I could not return to the school system as a teacher. I could return in a different capacity, but not as a teacher. And I wasn't willing to do that. I had just bought a house. I was recently married, not to my wonderful husband of today. I am divorced. But I was married at that time. And so I was like, you know what? There's just a lot going on in my life where I cannot go backwards. as far as salary is concerned. So I decided to go ahead and start tutoring full time. I had heard of some of my coworkers talk about their tutoring experience and how much money they were making. And so I just decided, you know what, I'll try my hand at that. I did well. I was actually doing pretty good. I tutored for a year full time, and then I had to stop because of personal issues that were going on, not only in my marriage at the time, but just going on financially in our household. So I decided to return to the working force. I tutored every now and then while I was working, but again, my attention was not focused on building as it was at first. You know what I mean? I was just trying to survive. Like, that's just what it was. I'm trying to survive. I'm trying to make sure we got a roof over our head. I'm trying to make sure that we got food on the table. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, trying to build a business just wasn't on the top of my priority list. And so years passed by, and I got back into the school system. I was able to finish my certification program, and I felt like I had gotten a second wind, right? But this time I was just going to use this second opportunity to build a career in public school education. That's just what I was going to do. I was going to become an IST, an instructional support teacher. I was then going to move up the ranks and eventually become an area superintendent. That was my dream. That was my goal. And it didn't happen. Why? Because the Lord said, that's not what I have for you. That's what you want, but that's not what I want for you, right? And so, like I said, you know, I had been accepting additional responsibilities at my school. I was known as a teacher leader. I had gotten involved in different clubs and organizations just so I can get my name out there. And of course, you know, I was doing well with my primary job, which was teaching, right? I was doing very well with my students. My parents, you know, loved me. We got along very well. And so I don't know. I just thought that if I put all my ducks in a row, that would happen, and it didn't. And so once I told the Lord that I would follow his lead and that, you know, I would make this company a priority, and I relaunched it, doors started opening. Like, I was getting so many clients to tutor that I could not do both at the same time. I had got to a point where it was like, okay, Manika, you got to make a decision. You're either going to teach or you're going to run this business. It's one or the other. You're not going to be able to do both, right? And that was a scary place to be. A very scary place to be, because I like security. I like stability. I like to know where the next check is coming from, okay? And when you are a business owner, when you are an entrepreneur, all right, if you don't work, you don't eat, okay? That's what the Lord said pretty much in Genesis, and that is so true. You don't work, you don't eat, all right? That's just what it is. And so it was just scary. It was scary. And so I told the Lord in 2023, January 2023, I told the Lord, okay, I'm not going to renew my contract. Because he told me, he said, this is your last year. This is your last year in the classroom. Do not renew your contract. And I said, okay. So I told my principal, I'm not going to be renewing my contract for the next school year. She was like, are you sure? I was like, yes. Not really, but the Lord said yes, so I'm going to say yes. And I did it. I did not renew my contract. And so the summer came of 2023, right? School is out. It was July. Teachers in my district were returning to the classroom for pre-planning. And I'm sitting in my home office like, what am I going to do? I don't have to go return to the classroom. I only have like 5-6 clients. Right? And so I'm texting my old co-workers. I'm calling like, hey, what y'all doing? Y'all went to y'all first meeting? Y'all did? All right. Okay. Yeah, I'm here at the house. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know. And so, yeah, school started, and I started the year with my handful of clients, and that handful of clients a year and a half later turned into over 30 clients. And I went from tutoring by myself to having and contracting 5 other tutors. And so it bloomed, it blossomed, it grew into other services. Not only am I now tutoring, but I also provide consulting services to my parents by attending parent-teacher conferences with them. I attend IEP meetings with them. Not only that, but it also expanded to summer learning camp. So I now run a summer camp where it's like a 4 to 6 week camp over the summer. And I'm providing academic remediation and enrichment to the kids. We do really cool art projects and science projects. I also have a service where I provide to teachers, new teachers that are in need of mentorship or coaching. I mean, it has expanded beyond my wildest dreams. As a matter of fact, this year, I provide homeschool instruction. Like, it just took off. It took off bigger and better than I could have ever thought or imagined. And it's all because I followed the Lord's leading. My first video about launching or jump starting a business, I want you to go ahead and take a look at that, because if you are in that position or the position that I was in, where the Lord is saying, hey, launch out into the deep, right? It's time for you to do this. And you don't know where to start, check out that video. All right. Part 1 of this video, I share jumpstart tips. Okay. I call it kit tips actually, but kit tips on how to jumpstart your business. Check that out. Okay. But if you are in the middle of launching out into the deep, right? You're already out there. Just keep going. The Lord is not going to steer you anywhere that He doesn't want you to be. Okay. He's not going to take you into a territory where He hasn't already prepared the way for you. Okay. He's not going to tell you to launch out here just for you to fail. He just isn't. You just can't see what He sees. His vantage point is way better than ours. And so I just wanted to share a little bit with you about my journey into this entrepreneurial role. I will say that I also utilize it to help me to share the gospel. You know, being in the classroom, it was very restrictive. You know what I mean? Like you're not allowed to really share your faith with your students or with your parents, right? But being in this capacity, I can do that. You know, I can do that with my students. I can do that with my parents. You know, I don't impose it on them, but you know, it's not uncommon for me to ask them, can I pray for you? You know, I can invite some of them that I know that share my same faith. I can invite them to my church, you know, to hear a message or to an event. So it's really cool at what the Lord is doing through this company, at what He's doing through me, you know, and how I'm able to share His word and His gospel, and at the same time utilize my gifts and my passion to help build these students up and to help my former co-workers, to help, you know, educators, as well as my parents. So this has been an experience, and it is an experience that I don't regret. And again, if the Lord is calling you to launch out into the deep, launch out into the deep.